The planet turned slowly beneath them, a great green jewel suspended in the black canvas of space. Through the observation dome of the landing vessel, the explorers pressed closer to the glass, unable to stop themselves from staring. "Look at it breathe," murmured Dr. Callan Stray. His voice carried a kind of reverence. He leaned forward, the light of the planet casting a pale shimmer across his dark eyes. Below, swathes of forest stretched unbroken from horizon to horizon, punctuated only by rivers that gleamed like strands of molten silver. Captain Aloin Marek did not correct him, though she knew the world did not breathe, yet it seemed to. White mist curled above the forests, pulsing in slow rhythms as if the land itself exhaled. She let the moment sit unbroken. Their journey across months of starless dark had been silent, dutiful, marked by the hum of engines and the endless practice of protocols. Now they had arrived, and silence meant something new. Myra Solon, the geologist, adjusted her spectacles as if to see more clearly. The ridges on the northern hemisphere, they almost looked sculpted, not by hands, but by time, by something persistent. Her voice held wonder, not analysis. Jonas Harrow, always practical, grunted. "What matters is finding a safe landing site. The forests look like they could swallow our whole ship without a trace." "And would that be so bad?" Nada Pell's tone was dreamy, her gaze fixed on the glimmer of light where ocean met shore. "To be swallowed, I mean, to be absorbed by a place that has never known us." She turned, a smile tugging at her lips. Perhaps it would be a kind of belonging. Jonas muttered but did not argue. The vessel shifted, breaking through the outer reaches of the atmosphere. Heat flared around the hull, turning the viewing dome briefly into a sphere of fire. Then, as quickly as it had come, the glow softened, giving way to color. The sky was not blue, but a shade of emerald, pale and luminous. Shadows of drifting cloud banks stretched for miles. They descended toward a valley where two rivers braided together into a mirror-bright lake. Around it spread meadows of soft gold grass and forest that shimmered as though each leaf were coated in glass. "Bring us down near the water's edge," Captain Marek instructed softly. The ship obeyed, its thrusters stirring ripples across the lake as they settled. With a final exhale of pressure, the vessel rested upon the soil of a world no human had ever touched. For a moment, no one moved. They listened. Through the hull, faint sounds filtered in, a thrumming hum, a distant chorus of chimes, the lap of water against stone. Captain Marek rose first. "Suit up, slowly. We will step outside together." They gathered at the airlock, each sealed in protective suits not for war, but for caution. Myra's hands trembled slightly as she fastened her gloves. Callan's eyes were alight, his breathing quick. Nada whispered something under her breath, a line of poetry perhaps, or a prayer. The airlock hissed open. The first breath of the world spilled inside, heavy with scent. Even through the filters of their helmets, they caught it, floral, damp, with a mineral edge like wet stone. They stepped onto the ground. The soil was soft beneath their boots, springing back as though alive. The grass surrounding them swayed not only in the wind, but in delicate patterns, leaning toward them, then away, as though curious. "Recording first impressions," Nada murmured into her recorder. Her voice was hushed. "The world greets us not with silence, but with song. The air is alive. The ground is warm. Everything feels aware." Dr. Callan knelt immediately, scooping a handful of soil into a vial. "Dark, rich, almost black, full of organic matter. I will run analysis as soon as we return." His gloved fingers brushed over blades of grass that shimmered faintly with iridescence. "They bend toward heat," he whispered. "Not light, toward us." Jonas scanned the surroundings with a steady hand on his equipment. "Radiation levels are safe. No toxins detected. Air is breathable if we remove helmets, though I suggest we wait." Captain Marek nodded. She knelt beside a pool of water at the lake's edge. Its surface shimmered, but not only with light. Small organisms moved within, spiraling in deliberate patterns that looked like woven threads. "Even the water writes," she said quietly. Myra had walked a few paces farther. She crouched beside a stone half buried in the soil. "Look at this." She brushed away the dirt. The rock glittered with veins of crystal, pale green, almost matching the sky. This whole valley was once part of a riverbed, perhaps millennia ago, and yet the stone has not broken, it has grown. She touched the crystal, as though the world repairs itself. They lingered there, each of them finding something to marvel at. A bird-like creature with wings of translucent silk fluttered past, unafraid. Strange blossoms opened as they walked by, releasing faint notes like chimes. Nada at last said what all of them felt. This is not an empty world. It is not a wilderness waiting to be charted. It is a garden. And we must decide whether we are guests or intruders. Captain Marek turned toward the horizon, where the forests shimmered in endless green. Then we must tread gently, she said. Every step must be chosen as though the world itself is listening. And somehow, as the wind moved through the glassy leaves of the trees, it felt as though it was. The morning began with mist. It gathered along the lake's edge in pale ribbons, lifting gently as the sun of this strange world rose. The sky was not a single shade, but a gradient, emerald at the horizon fading into soft turquoise overhead. Clouds shimmered faintly, as if dusted with crystal. The explorers emerged from the vessel one by one, boots pressing into grass still damp with dew. Dr. Callan Stray stretched his arms wide as if to embrace the whole valley. "It smells alive," he said, his voice muffled through the helmet. "Do you feel it? The air isn't just air, it's textured, like breathing in velvet." Jonas Harrow checked his scanner and frowned. "Velvet or not, the air is rich with compounds I can't identify. Safe, yes, but unfamiliar. Keep the helmets on until we've done more testing." Nada Pell walked a few paces closer to the tree line, the skirts of her protective suit brushing the golden grass. "Jonas, must everything be reduced to safe or unsafe?" she asked softly. "Perhaps it is also a question of welcome or unwelcome. So far, the land seems to welcome us." Jonas muttered something about wishful thinking, but he did not follow her. Captain Aloan Marek stood apart, gazing toward the forest. The trees gleamed faintly, as if each leaf were made of glass tinted with green. Sunlight scattered through the canopy, breaking into shifting mosaics upon the ground. She felt not for the first time that they had landed not on a wilderness, but in some vast cathedral. "Myra," she said, "what do you see?" Mira Solon crouched near the roots of a tree at the edge of the forest. She brushed away soil with a small brush, revealing that the roots themselves shimmered with threads of crystal. "It is as I suspected," she replied. The mineral veins that run through the rocks extend into the trees themselves. They do not merely grow beside crystal, they grow with it, as if the world blurs the line between stone and living wood. Callan joined her, kneeling beside a patch of flowering plants. The blooms were pale and translucent, shaped like bells. He brushed one with a gloved fingertip, and at once a soft hum filled the air. It was a single note, resonant and low, that seemed to vibrate through the soil. He gasped. "They respond to touch, these flowers sing." Nada turned, her eyes widening. "They sing back to you." She crouched, watching as Callan touched another bloom. A second note joined the first, harmonizing faintly before fading. Myra tilted her head, listening. Not random. Each plant holds a different pitch. Together they could form music. Jonas gave a small shake of his head, though his lips curved despite himself. "Singing flowers, of course. Next we'll find rocks that dance." Callan only grinned. "Do you realize what this means? Communication, perhaps. Or maybe the flowers are attuned to vibration and pressure. Either way, it is remarkable." Captain Marek placed a hand lightly on Callan's shoulder. "Document it thoroughly, but remember we must tread with care. We are not here to strip the land for knowledge, only to listen." Callan nodded earnestly. They moved deeper into the forest, their boots sinking slightly into the rich soil. The air grew warmer under the canopy, thick with the scent of resin and sweet fruit. Shafts of sunlight pierced the glassy leaves, scattering rainbow colors onto the path ahead. The deeper they walked, the more signs of life revealed themselves. Small creatures, round-bodied and covered in downy fur, darted between the roots. They chirped in soft, fluting tones, unafraid of the newcomers. Bright insects with wings like shards of gemstone hovered among the singing flowers, leaving trails of faint light in their wake. Nada held out her hand as one of the creatures paused near her boot. Its large eyes regarded her with what seemed almost like curiosity. It trilled a note, soft and sweet. She smiled, though her helmet hid it. "You see, even the smallest lives greet us." Jonas raised his scanner again. "It is more likely the little beast thinks you might have food." "Perhaps," Nada said, her voice lilting. "But what is a greeting if not the hope of nourishment?" They came upon a clearing where the trees parted around a pool. The water here was not clear but opalescent, shimmering with shifting colors as though the surface held liquid light. Strange reeds grew at its edges, bending in elegant arcs that never broke, no matter how the breeze stirred them. Myra crouched at once, examining the pool's rocky border. "These stones are porous, filled with the same green crystal as the roots. Look here," she tapped gently. The stone gave off a faint chime. It is as though the entire landscape is tuned, resonant. Stone, tree, flower, even water, each carries a note. Callan dipped a probe carefully into the pool, and within, yes, microorganisms, astonishingly complex. Some appear bioluminescent. They gather into patterns. Look, they are forming a spiral. The explorers bent closer. Indeed, the luminous motes in the water drifted together until they shaped a perfect coil. Then, as if sensing they were watched, the spiral slowly unwound into a line that pointed toward the deeper forest. For a long moment, no one spoke. At last, Nada whispered, "It shows us the way." Jonas shifted uncomfortably. "Or it simply follows currents beneath the surface. Do not make it more than it is." "And if it is more?" Nada asked gently. Captain Marek straightened. "Whatever the truth, we will follow. If nothing else, the path will deepen our understanding." They pressed onward, guided by shafts of light and the faint trill of unseen birds. The forest was not silent, yet every sound seemed part of a whole, no noise harsh or jarring, only woven into a greater harmony. After some time, Captain Marek called a halt. "Here," she said, indicating a broad rise near the base of a great tree. "We will set a temporary camp. From this vantage, we can observe both the clearing and the surrounding canopy. It will do for our first night." Jonas nodded briskly, already unfolding the collapsible framework of a shelter. Callan unpacked his sample cases, eager to begin cataloging specimens. Myra sketched the crystalline patterns on the stones with careful strokes in her field journal. Nada wandered a little distance away, recorder in hand, speaking softly. "The forest accepts us without fear," she murmured. "Its creatures pause but do not flee. Its plants respond to touch and sound. The land itself seems to sing in resonance. It is a chorus, and we," she paused, then smiled faintly. "We are new notes added to its song." As the camp took shape, Captain Marek found herself gazing once more at the forest beyond. The leaves shifted in the breeze, scattering prismatic light. For an instant, she thought she saw movement among the shadows, something tall, gliding, almost human in shape. She blinked, and it was gone, perhaps only a trick of the light. Or perhaps the forest did indeed watch them, as she had begun to suspect. When night fell, it was gentle. The emerald sky deepened to indigo, then to a velvet black spangled with stars. But the forest did not grow dark. The crystalline leaves glowed faintly, casting soft illumination. Firefly-like creatures drifted in slow arcs. The singing flowers released tones that rose and fell like a lullaby. The explorers gathered around a small lamp within their shelter. They removed their helmets at last, inhaling the alien air directly. It was warm, rich, filled with sweetness like overripe fruit. Nada sighed contentedly. "To think, our first breath of an alien world. I half expected fear, but instead I feel home." Jonas took a cautious breath, then another. "It is agreeable," he admitted. Callan grinned. "Agreeable, Jonas, it is extraordinary." Mira closed her journal, her voice hushed. "It feels as though the world is speaking in silence, and we are only beginning to understand its tongue." Captain Marek listened to them, her crew, her companions. She saw their eyes alight with wonder, their voices softened by awe. For all their differences, they shared the same quiet joy. She lay back upon the ground, looking up through the glowing canopy to the stars beyond. "We came here seeking knowledge," she whispered. "Perhaps we will find something greater. Perhaps we will find belonging." The leaves shifted once more, scattering rainbow light across her face, and in the hush between the flowers' songs, she thought she heard the forest breathe. The dawn of their second day came quietly, as though the forest itself had been careful not to disturb them. Captain Eloin Marek stirred first, blinking at the pale glow that seeped through the translucent canopy above their shelter. The air within the camp was warm, filled with a sweetness she had grown used to overnight. Outside, faint tones drifted, soft notes from the bell-shaped flowers, rising and falling like the breathing of the world. She sat up slowly, savoring the stillness. The others slept in quiet postures, their chests rising steadily. Only Jonas Harrow was awake, crouched near the equipment, tinkering with the compact generator. "Up early," Eloin said. He glanced over his shoulder, eyes shadowed but alert. "The generator gave me a reading I did not like. Nothing dangerous, only irregular. It is possible the mineral content of the soil interferes with the magnetic coils." Eloin nodded, unsurprised. A world like this was never going to be simple. Jonas's expression softened faintly. "No, but it is a pleasant sort of complication." By the time the others stirred, the camp was alive with small comforts. Jonas had coaxed the generator into harmony with the soil's unusual resonance. Myra Solon heated water over a portable coil, filling the camp with the earthy scent of brewed roots they had carried from the vessel. Dr. Callan Stray eagerly unpacked his vials of specimens, arranging them like treasures beside his bedroll. Nada Pell wandered the perimeter, her recorder in hand, speaking quietly as she described the play of dawnlight across crystalline leaves. After breakfast, they gathered to discuss the day. "We should establish our immediate surroundings," Eloin said. She crouched over the crude map Myra had drawn the evening before. "The forest clearing here, the pool with its luminous microorganisms here. I suggest we map a circle with the camp at its center. We should learn how the land flows, where water gathers, how the trees cluster. We will not stray far, not yet." Callan's eyes gleamed. "I will need samples from multiple microhabitats. The flowers, the canopy, the soil at different depths," Mira interrupted gently. "And I will take mineral surveys along the slope to the north. The ridges there may tell us how the valley formed." Nada smiled faintly. "And I will walk between you all, observing, recording how the explorers learned to listen to the forest." Jonas sighed, but there was no annoyance in it. "And I will make certain none of you walk too close to anything that might topple onto your heads." Eloin allowed herself a brief smile. "Very well, pair into twos then." Safety in proximity. By unspoken agreement, Myra and Jonas set out together, Myra sketching stones, while Jonas measured their resonance with his scanner. Callan and Nada drifted toward the meadow, where the singing flowers grew in thick carpets. Eloin remained near the camp at first, checking their supplies and reinforcing the shelter before following a line of trees toward the shimmering pool. The hours passed in unhurried discovery. Callan crouched among the flowers, his gloved hands moving with reverence. He pressed a small tuning fork against the petals of one bloom, and the flower's note shifted in answer, harmonizing with the fork's tone. "Nada, do you see?" His voice trembled with excitement. "They are not passive. They alter their pitch to match external sound." Responsive, adaptive, Nada knelt beside him, her recorder pressed close to her lips. "He describes with the heart of a scientist," she murmured, "but the flowers answer with the voice of musicians. It is not only response, it is companionship, call and answer." Callan laughed softly, as if embarrassed by the poetry. "Perhaps. But if they can harmonize, then they might serve as indicators of environmental change. Imagine an entire forest of flowers shifting pitch when storms approach or when soil chemistry changes." Nada touched a blossom gently. It hummed in a low, resonant note. "And perhaps," she whispered, "they sing simply because the world itself is filled with music, and they cannot help but join." Farther north, Myra traced the lines of crystal that veined through stone. The ridges were strange, formed not by violent upheaval, but by gradual folding, as though the land had grown tired and chosen to rest. She sketched each curve with careful strokes. Jonas tested a boulder with his scanner, then struck it lightly with a metal rod. A clear chime rang out, echoing through the forest. Myra turned, startled. "Jonas, what did you do?" "Only tested resonance," he replied with a shrug, "but it seems everything here wishes to be an instrument." The boulder's tone lingered, blending with the notes of the flowers in the distance. Myra set down her pencil, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you think the world shaped itself this way by chance? Or is it intention?" Jonas frowned. "Intention implies a designer, does it?" Myra touched the crystal seam on the rock, feeling the vibrations still humming through it. "Perhaps the world itself is the designer. Perhaps it grows in beauty because beauty is its nature." Jonas did not reply, but his gaze lingered on the glowing veins longer than before. At the pool, Eloin knelt by the water's edge. The luminous motes within drifted in new shapes. This time, not a spiral but a branching tree, its limbs spreading outward as if to mirror the forest around them. She watched, her breath slow. The water seemed aware, not as a creature is aware, but as a pattern is aware of itself. She touched the surface lightly with a gloved fingertip. The motes scattered, then slowly gathered again, forming a circle that pulsed faintly. She withdrew her hand. For a long moment she listened, not with ears but with presence. The pool did not speak in words, yet she felt as though it had noticed her. A silent acknowledgement, like the meeting of two steady gazes. By late afternoon, the explorers regrouped at the camp. Their voices carried a shared excitement, each speaking over the other until Eloin raised a hand for calm. "One at a time," she said. "Callan, you first." He launched into an eager report, describing the harmonizing flowers, their possible environmental sensitivity, their adaptive resonance. His hands moved animatedly as he spoke, and though Jonas rolled his eyes, even he could not hide a faint smile. Myra followed, laying out sketches of crystalline ridges and folded valleys. Her voice was steadier, but her eyes shone. "The land is not scarred as on Earth. It has grown slowly, like the rings of a tree, and each growth sings." Nada then recited her observations in her quiet, lilting tone. She spoke of companionship between scientists and flowers, of landscapes that designed themselves, of a world that welcomed notes into its song. When she finished, silence settled over the group. Even Jonas had no retort. Eloin nodded slowly. "It seems we are not cataloguing a wilderness. We are listening to a symphony. Every part of this world is tuned to every other. And we," Nada added softly, "are new instruments learning the melody." That evening, they prepared their first meal cooked entirely on the alien soil. The rations they had brought were plain, but Myra suggested boiling them in the pool water she had carefully sterilized. The result was astonishing. The bland roots and grains absorbed a subtle sweetness, a mineral depth that lingered on the tongue. Jonas took a spoonful, paused, then nodded once. "Better than expected." Callan laughed. "Jonas Harrow, giving praise. Now I know this world works miracles." Nada set down her bowl. "Perhaps the land wishes to feed us as well." Later, as they sat around the gentle glow of their lamp, the forest began its night song. The flowers shifted pitch, creating long, low notes that rose like mist. Insects with glowing wings circled overhead, casting patterns of light upon the shelter's canvas. The crystalline leaves shimmered with soft illumination, as though starlight had become part of their veins. The explorers fell silent, listening. Myra whispered, "Do you feel it? The rhythm? It is like a heartbeat, slow, steady, beneath everything." Eloin closed her eyes. Yes, she felt it too, not in her ears, but in her bones, in the soil beneath her boots. A pulse, steady as the tide. The world was not only alive, it was whole, and somehow it had made room for them within its harmony. That night Eloin dreamed. She stood in the forest, but it was taller, grander, every tree a pillar of glass and crystal. The flowers hummed in chords she could not name. The pool expanded into an ocean of light, and within it shapes drifted, vast, slow, like the movements of thought itself. A voice, though not a voice, touched her mind. "You are not apart." She woke with a soft gasp. the dream fading like mist at sunrise. Around her the others still slept, their faces calm. The forest outside glowed faintly, its heartbeat steady. Eloin lay back, her eyes fixed on the canopy. Perhaps it had only been a dream, or perhaps the world itself had spoken. The third morning dawned with a shimmer that seemed to come not from the sky, but from the land itself. Mist curled in slow ribbons between the crystalline trees, reflecting the pale green light of the rising sun. The explorers stirred within their camp, waking to the low hum of flowers and the faint glimmer of insects that had lingered through the night. Captain Eloin Marek stood at the camp's edge, gazing toward the deeper valley. The forest spread before her, vast and quiet, yet alive with subtle signs, patterns in the undergrowth, shifts in the air, faint echoes that seemed to travel from tree to tree. She felt a steady pull, as though the world itself was inviting them further. After breakfast, she gathered her companions. "We have mapped the immediate clearing," she said, indicating Myra's careful sketches. "Today we push farther, not recklessly, step by step. We will follow the ridge line and see where it leads." Dr. Callan's stray almost vibrated with excitement. "Deeper in, the species diversity should increase exponentially. I have already documented 4 types of flowering plants and at least 6 insect morphologies within a radius of 50 meters. Imagine what lies beyond." Jonah's harrow crossed his arms. "Imagine what else lies beyond. We should not assume everything that sings is friendly." Nada Pell tilted her head, smiling faintly. "And yet we cannot assume that silence means danger either. Perhaps the world will reveal itself as we learn to trust it." Mira Solon closed her journal with deliberate care. "The ridges are not random. They curve as though guiding us towards something. I think the land itself has a story it wishes to show." Eloin met each of their gazes in turn. "Then let us walk and listen." They set out in pairs again. Callan and Nada moved ahead, Callan stooping every few steps to examine blossoms, fungi, and curious insect trails. Nada recorded his commentary with gentle counterpoints of her own, noting not only the structure, but the way his wonder wove into the world around them. Myra walked beside Jonah's, her pace steady, her eyes always on the ground, and the crystals that gleamed faintly within it. Jonah's carried the scanner, its low hum blending with the tones of the forest. At times he would strike a stone with his rod, producing a chime that joined the hidden symphony of leaves and petals. Eloin lingered between them, watching both her crew and the land. She listened to the subtle heartbeat beneath the soil, steady as the rhythm of her own breath. The forest grew denser as they followed the ridge, the trees rising taller, their trunks woven with veins of green and silver crystal. Some trees bore leaves like stained glass, translucent and veined with gold. When sunlight passed through, it painted the ground with patterns that shifted as the breeze stirred the branches. Callan stopped so abruptly that Nada nearly walked into him. "Look here," he whispered. At the base of one great tree, a cluster of fungi glowed faintly blue. They pulsed in rhythm, dimming and brightening as though breathing. When Callan touched one gently, the entire cluster shifted its light, forming concentric rings that spread outward. "They respond to contact," he said in awe, "like the flowers, but in light instead of sound." Nada knelt beside him. "Perhaps they are not separate. The flowers sing in the day, the fungi glow in the shade. Different instruments, same song." Jonas grunted. "Or they are warning each other of disturbance." "Warnings can be songs too," Nada replied softly. They pressed on. The ridge curved downward into a hollow where the trees parted around a wide meadow. The grass here was silver rather than gold, its blades tall and fine, whispering against each other in the breeze. The air was filled with a faint, constant hum, not from flowers, but from the grass itself, as though every stalk vibrated with sound. And in the meadow grazed creatures unlike any they had yet seen. They were tall and slender, with elongated necks and bodies covered in soft scales that shimmered like mother of pearl. Their legs bent gracefully, ending in 3-toed feet that barely bent the grass as they stepped. Each creature bore a crest of translucent fins along its spine, which shifted colors with each movement, rippling like light upon water. The explorers froze at the meadow's edge. One of the creatures lifted its head. Its eyes were vast and luminous, reflecting the forest canopy. It did not flee. Instead, it released a long, low note, resonant as a cello. At once, the others in the herd answered, their tones layering together into a slow, harmonious chord. The silver grass bent in response, swaying not with the wind, but with the resonance of the creatures' voices. Nada's breath caught. They sing with the land itself. Callan's eyes shone. It is not only plants. The animals are part of the chorus too. Eloin raised a hand, motioning for stillness. She watched as the herd continued to graze, their movements unhurried, their voices weaving into the hum of the meadow. She felt no threat, only an overwhelming sense of balance, as though the creature's presence completed a pattern the land had always meant to hold. Jonas whispered, almost against his will, "It is beautiful." For once, no one argued. They lingered at the meadow's edge for some time, sketching, recording, capturing data as unobtrusively as possible. Myra noted the crystalline structures that glittered faintly beneath the soil, connecting even here. Callan documented the creatures, shifting crest colors, which seemed to follow the tones of their song. Nada whispered verses into her recorder, her words weaving wonder into memory. At last, Eloin spoke. "We will move on. We will not disturb them further." Reluctantly, they left the meadow, following the ridge as it curved back toward the forest. The sun had risen higher now, casting long shafts of green-gold light through the canopy. The forest changed again. The trees grew broader, their trunks hollowed into arches like natural doorways. Moss the color of deep sapphire carpeted the ground. When they stepped upon it, it released faint puffs of luminescent spores that drifted upward like tiny lanterns. Callan knelt, collecting samples with careful hands. These spores, look how they hover. They do not fall as dust does. They remain suspended, almost as if alive. Mira ran her fingers along one of the hollowed trunks. The crystal veins within it glowed faintly as though reacting to her touch. "The trees are conduits," she murmured, stone and wood intertwined, carrying light and tone through their bodies, like organs of a greater whole. Nada's gaze followed the drifting spores. Perhaps the world does not grow in pieces. Perhaps it grows as one body, one living being, with us walking through its veins. Jonas shifted uneasily. A living world is a dangerous notion. If it chooses to reject us, then we must walk as guests, Eloin said firmly, and hope our presence is received as such. They pressed onward until the ridge ended at another clearing. Here the ground fell away into a deep basin where water pooled in terraces, each level reflecting a different hue: emerald, sapphire, amethyst. The terraces cascaded gently into one another, forming a slow, steady song of falling water. The explorers stood in awe. "It is a cathedral," Myra whispered, "water and stone together, a place of reverence." Callan crouched at the edge of a terrace, dipping a vial into the emerald pool. Tiny motes drifted within, glowing faintly. "Again the same microorganisms," he murmured. "But more diverse here, as though the pools are breeding grounds. They move in patterns. Look, do you see? A lattice like woven cloth." Nada watched, her eyes wide. "It is as if the water remembers every note ever sung, every step ever taken. It weaves memory into itself." Eloin knelt beside the water, her reflection mingling with the glowing motes. She felt again that same quiet presence she had sensed at the smaller pool. Not hostile, not even questioning, simply aware. Watching, she spoke aloud, though she did not know to whom. "We come only to listen, to walk gently." The motes shifted, swirling into a spiral that pulsed once, twice, before dissolving back into ripples. The others saw it too. None spoke for a long time. By the time they returned to camp, the sky was deepening toward the strange twilight of this world. The crystalline leaves glowed faintly, the flowers lowered their tones, the insects shimmered like drifting stars. They shared another meal in quiet reverence, each still carrying the echoes of the meadow's song and the terrace's spiral. Nada finally broke the silence. "We walk through a world that is not only alive but whole. Each part is a note, and together they form a song greater than any single life. I begin to wonder if we are not only explorers but participants. Callan smiled faintly. Then we must learn to play our part well. Jonas said nothing, but his gaze lingered on the glowing canopy longer than before. When sleep came, it was filled with dreams of spirals and chords, of creatures whose voices bent the grass, of waters that wove memory. And through it all, the steady heartbeat of the world pulsed on, slow and patient, as though waiting for them to understand. The explorers soon learned that time on the green world was not measured by clocks, but by rhythm. Days flowed not in hours, but in pulses, the rising hum of flowers, the swelling chorus of grass, the shift of glowing spores as twilight came. Their watches ticked faithfully, but they began to feel that the world itself kept time more faithfully still. On their fourth morning, Captain Eloin Marek awoke to find Jonas Harrow already at work, adjusting the small solar panels that fed their generator. He moved with practiced efficiency, but when he struck the ground to test for resonance, a habit that had become his alone, he paused to listen longer than usual. "Jonas," Eloin said quietly. He glanced back. "Panels need to align with the angle of light. The sun here drifts differently." Eloin raised a brow, and the listening, for a moment he did not answer. Then almost reluctantly he said, "It is easier to work when you hear the harmony beneath your hands." Eloin smiled faintly but said nothing. They began to form rituals. Callan Stray walked each morning to the singing meadow, where he gently tapped the flowers to hear their tones. He recorded the changing chords, convinced that the plants shifted their songs in patterns that spoke of more than mere reaction. Sometimes Nada accompanied him, her voice weaving words between the flowers' notes. Myra Solon traced the ridges northward, her sketches capturing the curves of stone and crystal. Jonas joined her, carrying heavier equipment, but she noticed that he too now paused to admire the way sunlight struck crystal seams. They spoke little, but their silences grew companionable. Eloin often returned to the terraces of water, drawn by the motes that danced in spirals and lattices. She knelt at their edges, speaking softly into the quiet, unsure if the world heard her words, or if she was only learning to hear herself more clearly. One afternoon, Callan hurried back to camp with a discovery. His cheeks were flushed, his hands trembling as he held out a cluster of seed pods. They were translucent, filled with faintly glowing dust. "They resonate," he said breathlessly. "Listen." He shook the pods gently. They chimed in perfect triads, each pod tuned differently. "I found them hanging from the lower branches of the glass-leaf trees, and when the wind stirs them together," he demonstrated, letting the pods brush against one another. The sound that emerged was not noise, but harmony, a chord that swelled and faded like a sigh. Nada clasped her hands to her chest. "It is as if the trees sing lullabies to themselves." Mira leaned closer, or perhaps to the creatures beneath them, music as shelter. Jonas scratched his chin. "Music as defense, more likely, loud enough and nothing with sharp teeth will linger." But though his words were practical, his eyes softened as he listened. That night, the explorers strung the pods along the edge of their shelter. As the evening wind rose, the camp filled with gentle chords. The tones blended with the hum of flowers and the pulse of insects until it seemed their small camp was woven seamlessly into the world's own music. For the first time, Eloin thought, they no longer felt like strangers. As days passed, their meals changed too. Myra experimented with boiling roots in different pools, noting subtle differences in flavor. One pool lent sweetness, another a faint spice, another a bitterness that reminded her of coffee. Jonas grumbled about her reckless cooking, but he never left food uneaten. And once, when Myra teased him about his empty bowl, he muttered, "If the world chooses to flavor our rations, who am I to argue?" Callan collected edible fruits, bright spheres that glowed faintly at night. He tested them cautiously, then shared them with the others. Their juice was tart but refreshing, and afterward they all swore they dreamed more vividly. Nada recorded those dreams, her voice soft as she described them each morning. Myra dreamed of rivers that folded like ribbons, Jonas dreamed of fireflies building bridges of light. Callan dreamed of flowers singing his name. She smiled gently. I dreamed of nothing, for the world was already speaking to me. Eloin said little of her own dreams, though each night she felt that same quiet presence touch her, neither word nor image but simple acknowledgement. One evening, as they sat around the lamp listening to the chorus of flowers, Jonas cleared his throat. You ever wonder, he said, why us? Out of all the crews who could have been sent, why this group? Callan chuckled. Because no one else would put up with you, Jonas glared, but his lips twitched. I am serious. We are not soldiers or conquerors. We were chosen for observation, for gentleness. Mira set her pencil down. Perhaps the world called for that, not conquest, but listening. Nada nodded slowly. Yes, a world of song would call for listeners, not breakers. We are here not to own, but to join. Eloin studied them all, her crew gathered in the soft glow of an alien night. She thought of their laughter, their wonder, their patience. She thought of how Jonas had begun to listen, how Callan sang without knowing, how Myra drew maps that looked like poems, how Nada carried silence as though it were a gift. Perhaps, Eloin said softly, the world chose us, not the other way around. For a long time, no one answered. Then Jonas muttered, if that is true, it had better not regret it. But his voice held warmth. The next morning, Nada asked them to join her at the pool of terraces. She had been watching the moats carefully, noting their patterns. They shift not only with touch, she said, but with presence. Watch. They stood together, gazing into the emerald pool. The moats drifted lazily, until one by one they gathered into spirals. Not random spirals, but 5 distinct ones, each pulsing faintly. Callan leaned forward. 5, one for each of us. Mira frowned. Coincidence? Nada shook her head. I do not think so. The patterns change when we stand here together. It is as though the water knows us, not as strangers, but as notes already added to its song. Eloin felt the truth of it deep in her bones. She reached toward the pool, and the motes in her spiral brightened in answer. The others gasped softly as their own spirals pulsed, light swelling in quiet harmony. They stood there for a long time, bathed in reflected light, 5 explorers bound together not only by mission, but by something greater. When at last they turned back toward camp, none of them spoke. Words seemed too small. That evening the world offered them a gift. As twilight deepened, the herd of pearl-scaled creatures emerged from the silver meadow and approached the forest's edge. Their long necks swayed gently, their translucent crests glowing faintly in the dim light. One by one, they released deep, resonant notes. The trees answered. Their seed pods chimed in soft chords, harmonizing with the creatures' calls. The flowers shifted pitch, weaving delicate threads through the bass tones. Even the ground seemed to vibrate, carrying the sound outward. The explorers sat in stillness, overwhelmed. It was not performance, not display. It was life, ordinary yet extraordinary, the world speaking in all its voices at once. Nada whispered, tears in her eyes, we are hearing the language of the land. Callan gripped her arm, unable to speak. Myra sketched blindly, her lines trembling. Jonas sat very still, his eyes fixed on the glowing crests. Eloin closed her eyes and listened. The song filled her chest, her veins, her bones. It was not only sound, but presence, steady and vast. For the first time since they had left Earth, she felt utterly at peace. When the song faded into night, none of them moved. They sat together in silence until the stars rose high above, and the forest's heartbeat carried them into sleep. In the days that followed, their bond deepened further. They spoke more softly, laughed more easily, shared not only duties, but quiet moments of wonder. They began to dream of building not a camp but a home, small gardens, a library of sketches and notes, a place where humanity and the green world might coexist. The mission's goals still lay ahead, to catalogue, to report, to decide what should come next. But already they felt the weight of choice. To explore meant to change, and they did not wish to break what had welcomed them so gently. Eloin knew the time would come when decisions had to be made. But for now, as the world sang around them, she allowed herself to rest in belonging. They were not conquerors, they were companions, and perhaps in the harmony of this lush world, They were at last learning what it meant to be human. On the sixth morning, the explorers awoke to silence. It was not a silence of absence, but of waiting. The flowers had not begun their song, the grasses in the meadow whispered only faintly, and even the crystalline pods along their shelter hung still. Eloin Marek felt the change at once. She rose quietly and stepped outside, scanning the sky, the ridges, the pools of light. Nothing seemed amiss, yet the air was heavy, like a pause before an orchestra's first note. Jonas Harrow emerged behind her, yawning and rubbing his eyes. "What is it?" he muttered. "Listen," Eloin said. Jonas frowned, tilting his head. Then his brows drew together. "Where's the hum?" Callan Stray tumbled from his tent, arms already full of instruments. "I knew it," he said, breathless. "I recorded fluctuations last night." The tones fell irregularly, as though the world was shifting into another phase. Nada Pell joined them, her hair still unbound from sleep. She looked around, her expression serene. "It is not gone, it is gathering." Mira Solon came last, clutching her journal to her chest. She had dreamed of spirals again, vast and intricate, unfolding endlessly. "Something is about to begin," she whispered. They did not have long to wait. As the sun rose higher, a tremor of light passed through the leaves. The seed pods began to chime, not in scattered harmony, but in unison, a single chord that swelled and held. The flowers followed, each note entering at precise intervals, layering together with mathematical grace. The grasses in the meadow bent as though struck by invisible hands, their whisper rising in perfect counterpoint. Even the terraces of water shifted, their cascades falling in rhythms that matched the song. The entire valley had become an instrument. Callan fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "It is not random. It was never random. This is a system, an organized living symphony." Nada closed her eyes, her lips moving in silent prayer. A liturgy written not in words, but in being. Mira's hand shook as she sketched the flow of sound waves, trying desperately to capture what her eyes could not see. The ridges, the terraces, the meadows, they are all placed, shaped, carved to carry this. This is not accident. This is design. Jonas swallowed hard, his usual skepticism failing him. Designed by what? Eloin did not answer. She was listening, every fiber of her being attuned to the vast, resonant order that surrounded them. The song was not for beauty alone, it was communication. As they listened, the patterns deepened. Callan began to map the intervals, realizing that certain chords repeated with variations as though forming a language. The motes in the pools shifted in spirals that matched the rhythm, glowing brighter with each swell of sound. Nada touched the water, and her spiral pulsed in time with the chord. "It responds to us still," she murmured. "Not just to us," Myra said, pointing toward the meadow. The pearl-scaled creatures had gathered at its edge, their long necks lifted high, crests glowing. They sang, but unlike before, their tones aligned precisely with the valley's song. They were not adding to it, they were part of it, woven seamlessly. Callan's voice trembled. Plants, animals, water, stone, all of it. One network, one body, every voice necessary. Jonas rubbed his temples. If that is true, then this entire valley, maybe this entire world, is one vast organism. Nada opened her eyes, her gaze steady. A world that sings to itself, a world that remembers itself through harmony. Eloin felt her heart race. If this was true, then they were not merely visitors. They were standing inside a living being's heartbeat. They spent the day in feverish work. Callan recorded tones, Myra sketched waveforms, Jonas scanned geological structures, Nada wrote observations that read more like poetry than science. Eloin oversaw them all, her mind spinning with implications. In the afternoon, they returned to the terraces of water. The pools glowed brighter than before, their moats swirling in patterns that mirrored the valley's song. When they all stood together, the spirals once again aligned, 5 lights pulsing in time with 5 heartbeats. Callan gasped, "It includes us, we are part of the system now." Nada's voice was hushed. "We are no longer observers, we have been added to the song." Jonas looked stricken. "But what does that mean? That it can change us, control us?" Eloin placed a hand on his shoulder. or that it can accept us. The question is, are we willing to accept it in return? That night, as they sat beneath the canopy, the valley's song continued, not overwhelming but steady, a quiet undercurrent like a heartbeat. They shared little food, for none of them were hungry. The music filled them as surely as nourishment. Nada spoke first. We used to think life meant separation. Organisms distinct, competing, surviving alone. But here, life is chorus. Nothing alone, everything together. Callan nodded eagerly. Symbiosis not as exception, but as law. A world where cooperation is the foundation of survival. Mira's eyes shone. If that is true, then perhaps this is why we were brought here, to learn what humanity has forgotten. Jonas rubbed his hands over his face. Or to see what we can never be. Eloin looked at him. Can we not? Have we not already begun? He did not answer, but he did not look away. Later, when the others had drifted into uneasy dreams, Eloin remained awake. She listened to the valley's steady chord, to the soft chiming of the pods above her head. She thought of Earth, its noise, its divisions, its restless hunger. Here life did not consume for dominance. It joined, harmonized, became more by being together. And she wondered what would happen if humanity learned to live this way. She whispered into the night, not knowing if the world heard her. We are small and we are flawed, but we are listening, we are trying. For a moment, the chord deepened, pulsing warm and low, like an answer. Eloin closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt she was not leading her crew into the unknown. She was being led. The morning began not with silence, nor with song, but with dissonance. Captain Eloin Marek was the first to hear it, a faint fracture in the valley's music, like a cracked note in a perfect chord. She sat upright in her tent, heart racing, until she realized the sound had not come from her dreams. It lingered in the air, wrong and uneven, a ripple of disharmony that spread outward. Jonas Harrow emerged next, his face grim. You hear it too? Eloin nodded. Something is out of balance. The others quickly joined them. Callan Stray clutched his instruments, checking them in frantic sequence. It is not the pods or the flowers. Their tones are steady. The dissonance is deeper structural. Nada Pell closed her eyes, listening. It is like a heart skipping. The world itself falters. Mira Solon pointed toward the ridge. There, do you see? At the far edge of the meadow, smoke curled faintly into the air. Not fire, at least not flame, but a dark vapor rising from the ground. The explorers set out at once. As they crossed the silver grass, the pearl-scaled creatures lifted their heads. Their voices were strained, their resonant notes faltering as though their throats were dry. The grass bent awkwardly, not with grace but with tremors. Even they feel it, Callan murmured. They cannot hold the cord. The ridge revealed the source soon enough. A fissure had opened in the ground, jagged and raw, as though the land itself had torn apart. From it poured a dark mist that reeked of metal and ash. Around the fissure, the crystal-veined trees sagged, their leaves dull, their pods cracked and silent. Callan fell to his knees, horrified. The lattice is broken here, the veins have snapped. Mira crouched, running her fingers along the edge of the fissure. This is not natural erosion. It looks sudden, forced. Jonas scanned the fissure with a handheld reader. Radiation spike. Something deep beneath the surface has shifted. Pressure, energy, I cannot tell what, but it is bleeding into the air. Nada's face was pale. It is a wound. The world is wounded. Eloin's jaw tightened. Then the question is, what do we do? They set up camp beside the fissure, though none liked the heaviness in the air. Callan began collecting samples of the mist, coughing as he worked. It disrupts the microorganisms in the water, he explained hoarsely. The motes lose coherence near it. The song falters because the smallest voices are drowned. Mira studied the broken crystals. The lattice here no longer carries resonance. It is like a snapped string. Energy pools without escape, twisting into poison. Jonas shook his head. We are explorers, not healers of worlds. If this is tectonic, planetary, there is nothing we can do. But Nada looked at him, eyes fierce. Would you leave a wounded creature to bleed if you could staunch it? This world has welcomed us. Can we do less in return? Silence fell. Even Jonas did not answer. At last Eloin spoke. We do not yet know how to help, but we can try. Their first attempts were clumsy. Callan rigged filters to capture mist, but the flow was constant. Jonas suggested collapsing the fissure with charges, but Myra argued it would shatter the crystals further. Nada tried singing softly into the mist, her voice weaving notes of comfort, but the fissure only hissed in reply. Frustration grew. They were scientists, poets, seekers, not healers of a living planet. Yet the dissonance gnawed at them, making sleep restless, dreams jagged. The valley's chorus staggered, unable to mend itself. On the third night, Eloin dreamt of the terraces of water. She saw the spirals of moats unraveling, breaking into chaos. She reached out, and in her dream the moats reformed, gathering around her hand. When she woke, her chest throbbed with the echo of their pulse. She called the others together. "We have been trying to mend this as though it were a machine," she said. "But it is not machine, it is body, it is song. We must answer in kind." Nada's eyes lit. "Yes, not force, but harmony." Mira frowned. "But how? We do not know the language." Callan whispered almost to himself. "Perhaps we do. We have been part of the song since the pools first recognized us. The world has already added our voices." Eloin nodded. "Then let us give them." They stood at the edge of the fissure. The mist roiled, thick and acrid, its tone a grinding discord. Nada began first, her voice soft and clear, singing a single note that rose steadily. The fissure hissed louder, but she did not stop. Callan added his voice, shaky at first, then stronger, holding a lower tone that underpinned hers. Myra joined with a hum, steady and precise, weaving between them. Jonas hesitated, but then his deep voice entered, rough yet grounding. Finally, Eloin lifted her voice, steady as command, binding the others together. Their 5 notes merged into a chord, imperfect but sincere. For a moment, nothing happened. The fissure writhed, its mist surging higher. Then faintly, the cracked pods along the trees chimed, one then another, answering in hesitant harmony. The ground beneath them shuddered. The mist thinned slightly. "Again," Eloin said, and they sang louder, fuller, letting breath and heart pour into sound. The fissure's roar faltered. The crystals along its edge flickered weak light, like sparks returning to embers. Jonas gasped between notes. "It is working." Callan's face was wet with tears. "We are giving back the note it lost." They sang until their voices broke, until their throats ached. At last, the fissure's mist slowed, its discord softening into silence. The cracked pods glowed faintly, their chords returning. When they stopped, the valley held still. Then slowly, the greater harmony rose again, flowers, grasses, water, creatures, all aligning into a steady, healing song. Nada fell to her knees, sobbing with relief. We did not mend it. We reminded it how to mend itself. Eloin closed her eyes, exhausted but certain. We have passed our first test. That night, the valley sang them to sleep with notes deeper, richer than before, as though gratitude had been woven into the land. Jonas whispered as he lay down, "We are not just guests anymore." And none of them disagreed. The fissure healed, but the memory of its dissonance lingered. For days afterward, the explorers listened more intently than ever, attuned to the subtleties of the world's song. Every tremor of tone, every flicker of light seemed more deliberate, as though the valley itself was breathing a little slower, a little deeper after its wound. Captain Eloin Marek found herself walking the ridges at dawn, her steps careful, her ears open. She no longer felt she was leading her crew into unknown land. She felt instead that she was being guided, her path chosen for her by something vast and patient. On the 5th morning after the healing, Myra Solon came running into camp, her journal clutched to her chest, her breath ragged with excitement. "I found something," she gasped. The others gathered quickly. Myra spread her sketches across the table, patterns carved into the stone face of a ridge farther north, interlocking spirals etched with precision, lines that mirrored the lattice of crystal veins. Jonas frowned. "Natural erosion?" Mira shook her head fiercely. "No, the spirals are too precise. Their proportions match the golden ratio almost exactly. They are not random marks. They are design." Nada leaned close, her fingers tracing the spiral's curve. "They echo the patterns of the water moats. And the way the songs cycle," Callan added softly, "it is the same mathematics, repeated across mediums." Eloin's voice was steady, though her heart raced. Then we are not the first to walk here. They followed Myra to the ridge. The climb was steep, but when they reached the top, the carvings stretched before them in vast panels, spirals layered upon spirals, each etched deeply into the crystalline stone. Some spirals were small, delicate as fingerprints. Others were vast, curling across meters of rock. Together they formed a tapestry that seemed to vibrate faintly in the sunlight. Jonas ran his scanner across the surface. The carvings are old. Erosion has softened the edges, but the depth remains. Centuries at least, maybe millennia. Callan's hands trembled as he traced a spiral. Whoever made this understood the lattice. These spirals are not decoration. They are instructions, a map of resonance. Nada closed her eyes, pressing her palm flat against the stone. It hums still. The song lives within it, even after so long. Eloin stepped back, surveying the ridge as a whole. This is not accident. This is not nature alone. Someone or something shaped this world's harmony. They camped at the ridge that night, unable to leave the carvings behind. The air seemed charged, as though the spirals themselves were listening. Myra sketched feverishly, filling page after page with copies of the designs. Callan muttered equations, trying to translate the patterns into frequencies. Nada sat quietly, eyes half closed, whispering fragments of poetry that seemed to rise unbidden from the stone. Jonas remained restless, pacing along the ridge. At last he turned to Eloin. If there was intelligence here once, where is it now? Why leave only carvings? Eloin's gaze lingered on the spirals, glowing faintly in moonlight. Perhaps it did not leave. Perhaps it became the song. Jonas shook his head. That is faith, not fact. Sometimes the two are closer than we think, Eloin replied quietly. The next morning, Callan made a breakthrough. He had mapped the proportions of the largest spiral and realized its curve aligned precisely with the terraces of water. Look, he said, jabbing at his chart. The spiral's center points directly toward the basin. The mathematics here, this is not just a pattern, it is geography. These carvings are aligned with the valley itself. Mira gasped. A map written in resonance. Nada whispered, a memory carved into stone. Jonas scowled, though his voice wavered. Then whoever made this shaped the valley intentionally. The pools, the meadows, the lattice, none of it was chance. Eloin stared northward, toward the terraces barely visible in the distance. Then the valley is not only alive, it is legacy. Someone built this harmony long ago, and the world has carried it forward. Compelled, they returned to the terraces. This time, when they stood at the pools, they looked with new eyes. The moats that drifted within the waters no longer seemed like simple organisms, but living symbols, echoes of the spiral designs. Their movements matched the carved ratios, as though the pools themselves were carrying out instructions written ages past. Nada knelt, her voice trembling. The spirals in the ridge, the spirals in the water, the spirals in our dreams, they are one language. Callan nodded, his voice hushed. A language of resonance. Whoever carved those patterns left behind not words, but music, etched into the land itself. A symphony written in stone and crystal. Mira dipped her fingers into the water. The motes swirled toward her touch, forming the beginning of a spiral. And the world remembers still. It sings the song left for it. Eloin felt a chill, not of fear, but of awe. Then we are walking inside a cathedral not of faith, but of memory. A cathedral that has lasted for ages. That night, the dreams came stronger. Eloin dreamed of towering figures with hands of crystal and eyes of light, carving spirals into stone with patience that spanned centuries. Nada dreamed of voices so deep they shook mountains, teaching the valley its first songs. Callan dreamed of threads of light weaving through soil, binding root to stone, flower to pool, creature to sky. Myra dreamed of maps that stretched across continents, spirals connecting valley to valley, lattice to lattice. Jonas dreamed of silence, of being alone in the valley with all songs gone. He woke sweating, his chest tight. But when he stepped outside, he heard the steady hum of the world. The song had not ended. He whispered into the night, as though the carvings might hear. If you are still here, show us how to keep it safe. In the days that followed, the explorers documented every spiral, every alignment, but more than data, they carried a growing sense of responsibility. This was not simply an alien ecosystem, it was inheritance. Someone had shaped harmony here, and the world had carried it forward for ages. Now, with the fissure and its dissonance, they knew harmony could be broken. And they knew, too, that perhaps the song itself had called them, not to conquer, not to observe alone, but to protect. The valley's song had returned to its full, resonant glory, but its memory of the fissure lingered in subtle vibrations that no one could ignore. Captain Eloin Marek stood at the edge of the terraces, gazing into the pools where the moats spun in spirals. She had been silent for most of the morning, listening as the valley breathed in tones and light. The song was steady, but she knew it could falter again if left unchecked. Jonas Harrow appeared beside her, scanning the pools with his handheld device. "We stabilized the fissure," he said, his voice low, "but it is not permanent. The underlying pressure remains. I estimate it could reopen at any time." Eloin nodded. "And if it does, then the harmony collapses. The creatures, the plants, even the water could suffer. The song falters, and this world could be wounded beyond repair." Callan Stray approached, carrying a notebook full of sketches and sound measurements. "It is more than that. The patterns in the ridge, the terraces, even the moats, they form a feedback system. If it breaks, the song might not recover fully. The world will be changed forever." Nada Pell followed, her voice gentle. "And yet the world healed itself once. We were only part of the song, not its architect." Mira Solan's eyes darted between the others. "But can we remain only participants? We've seen the damage. We've heard the dissonance. We are capable of helping, not just responding, but guiding." Eloin drew a deep breath. "Then we must choose. We can remain observers, careful to interfere as little as possible, letting the valley maintain itself. Or we can intervene, actively supporting the harmony." Jonas's lips pressed together. "Intervene, that is a heavy word. It carries risk. If we fail, if our actions disturb the balance further, then we are not protectors, we are intruders." Nada touched his arm. "But if we do nothing, the valley may suffer again. Is inaction less dangerous than action?" Callan's eyes glowed. "We have a responsibility. We were brought here for observation, yes. But perhaps the world itself invited us to participate, to learn, and to act." Mira nodded. "We have already left traces, our voices in the pools, our footsteps in the grass, our songs into the fissure. We are part of this world whether we like it or not." Eloin closed her eyes. The choice weighed on her like the tilt of the sun over the ridge. She could feel the heartbeat of the valley, slow and patient, yet aware. She imagined the spirals in the stone, the lattice of crystal beneath the trees, the delicate arcs of water in the terraces. All of it interconnected, alive, vulnerable. "If we are to act," she said finally, "then we must do so carefully, not as masters but as partners. We will learn its language, watch for signs, and respond with harmony rather than force." Jonas exhaled slowly. "Then we act in concert, not in command." Nada smiled faintly. "Exactly. We will be part of the song, not writers over it." Callan clapped his hands together, almost laughing. "Then let us begin. We have much to study and the valley is waiting." Mira drew her journal close. "We must map all spirals, chart all resonances, understand the patterns. Every stream, every pool, every crystal vein must be included." Their work began immediately. During the days that followed, they divided responsibilities according to skill and inclination. Callan focused on biological resonance, noting how flowers, moats, fungi, and creatures responded to shifts in energy or sound. Nada moved through the valley as a recorder of the subtle interconnections, her voice cataloging patterns that could not be quantified but could be felt. Myra traced crystal veins, terraces, and ridges, drawing maps that blended geography and resonance. Jonas studied pressure points, energy fluxes, and environmental stability. Eloin coordinated, ensuring that every observation fed into a collective understanding. They slept lightly, always aware of subtle shifts, always listening. The valley's song became their clock and calendar, guiding when to rest and when to move. One evening, after a long day of observation, they gathered at the terraces of water. The moats swirled in spirals, and the pools sang softly as though anticipating their presence. Callan knelt by the edge, dropping his hand into the water. The moats responded instantly, forming a spiral that extended far beyond the pool, reaching toward the meadow and into the ridge beyond. "Do you see?" he whispered. "Even after the fissure, the valley remembers its patterns. It adapts, it listens." Nada closed her eyes. "And we are a part of it now. Every note we add, every observation we record, every movement we make, our presence resonates through it." Mira traced the spiral with a fingertip, watching the moats shift in response. "It is like a conversation across centuries. The carvings, the pools, the lattice, they all speak to us and we respond." Jonas stood quietly, scanning the terraces. But conversation is choice. We can respond or remain silent. We have to decide carefully what we say. Eloin knelt, resting her hand on the rim of a terrace. "Then our work is not only study but stewardship. We choose when to sing and when to listen. Our voices must harmonize, not dominate." Days turned into weeks. The explorers grew closer, their bonds strengthened by shared purpose. Even Jonas, once skeptical, began to smile at the world's subtleties, noticing harmonics in the grass and patterns in the clouds. Callan laughed more often, letting his joy echo through the pools. Myra's sketches grew more intricate, capturing not only shape but rhythm and tone. Nada's voice rose and fell in melodies that seemed to guide the valley's song. Eloin observed them all and felt a deep satisfaction. They were learning not only the valley's ways, but their own. Their humanity was growing attuned to something greater than themselves. Then, one morning, a new challenge appeared. A series of tremors shook the ridge beyond the silver meadow. The moats in the pools pulsed erratically. Flowers faltered in their song. Even the pearl-scaled creatures lifted their heads, crests flickering in uneven colors. Jonas scanned immediately. Tectonic movement, minor but directional, it could destabilize the terraces if unchecked. Callan clutched his notebook. "And if the terraces are disrupted, the lattice fails, the pools lose coherence, the song falters." Nada stepped forward, voice calm. "Then we respond, not with panic but with harmony. We do as we have chosen, careful, mindful, present." Eloin nodded. "Then we move together." They spread across the valley, each taking positions at critical points. Callan encouraged the creatures to move through specific areas, their voices stabilizing minor tremors in the plant and insect populations. Myra reinforced weak points along the crystal veins with temporary supports, careful to mirror the natural structure. Jonas monitored pressure zones and energy flux, adjusting their interventions to prevent cascading failures. Nada sang continuously, her voice weaving into the natural chords, guiding the valley's own song to recover from the tremors. Eloin moved between them, coordinating, observing, adjusting their contributions. The valley trembled, shifted, then slowly, steadily reformed its harmony. By nightfall, the song had returned, stronger than before. The pools glowed. The creatures sang. The flowers and grass bent in perfect rhythm. The lattice beneath the soil hummed in quiet triumph. That night, they sat around their small campfire, exhausted but elated. Eloin spoke first. "We chose to act, and the valley responded, not because we were powerful, but because we joined, carefully, attentively, harmoniously." Jonas nodded, a rare smile breaking through his usual reserve. "We were afraid of being intruders, but we were welcomed as voices, not conquerors." Callan laughed softly, "And we have learned what it feels like to be part of a song that is older than memory itself." Nada added, "We are no longer simply observers, we are participants, and that carries both joy and responsibility." Mira traced a spiral in the dirt, echoing the carvings they had discovered. "Then we must continue. Study, guide, respond. The world does not call for mastery but for care." Eloin looked around at them all. "Then this is our choice, to listen, to act, to harmonize." And beneath the silver canopy of the alien night, the valley sang back, steady and patient, acknowledging the promise of its new companions. The days that followed the tremors passed in a rhythm the explorers had come to know intimately: observation, reflection, gentle intervention, and most importantly, listening. Every movement they made was measured, attuned to the pulses of the world itself. The valley no longer felt like an alien landscape to be mapped or studied. It felt like home, albeit one unlike any they had ever known. Captain Eloin Marek walked the ridge at dawn, her eyes tracing the curves of the valley below. Mist curled over the terraces of water, and the silver grass shimmered faintly, swaying in tune with the low hum of the flowers. The pearl-scaled creatures grazed peacefully in the meadow, their long crests pulsing with soft light. For the first time since they had arrived, she felt the presence of the valley as a conscious, patient intelligence, not hostile, not demanding, but ever watchful, ever listening. Myra Solon approached, sketchbook in hand, her pencil moving automatically to capture the interplay of light, water, and crystal. "Eloin," she said softly, "I have followed the crystal veins farther north. They connect every ridge, every pool, every meadow. It is a lattice, a vast, intricate system, not just the work of the landscape, but of deliberate design." Eloin's eyes narrowed, scanning the contours Myra had traced. "Design, deliberate?" "Yes," Myra replied, her voice trembling with awe. "The veins, the terraces, even the placement of the trees, they all correspond to patterns in the ridges, carvings. The pool's spirals, the moat's paths, the creatures' songs, they are all connected. It is a single network spanning the valley, perhaps the entire world." Callan Stray emerged from the terrace, carrying a notebook brimming with frequency measurements. "I've mapped the resonance through the pools, and it matches the crystal lattice almost perfectly. Every node reinforces another. It is a system that maintains harmony naturally through sound, vibration, and movement. We are seeing an ecosystem and an architecture at the same time." Nada Pell knelt at the edge of a pool, her fingers brushing the water as the motes responded instantly, spinning in perfect spirals. "And it remembers," she whispered. "Even after the fissure, the lattice healed itself because it was complete. It has intelligence, yes, but it is woven into life itself, not separate from it." Jonas Harrow, scanning a nearby ridge, frowned thoughtfully. "So this is why we were welcomed, chosen, perhaps. The valley has been calling for participants, voices to maintain its balance, not for us to dominate, but to harmonize." Eloin nodded slowly. "Then our mission has always been more than exploration. We are stewards now, not intruders, not conquerors, partners." They spent the next several days tracing the lattice in its entirety. Callan mapped the biological nodes: flowering plants that chimed with specific frequencies, pools whose motes responded to the smallest shifts, fungi that pulsed in low, bass tones. Nada documented the interactions, how creatures moved with the patterns, how insects and birds synchronized with the pool's spirals. Myra traced every crystal vein, noting the way they conducted vibrations across ridges and meadows. Jonas monitored pressures and energy flows, ensuring their presence did not destabilize the system. Eloin oversaw the work, observing patterns of collaboration, noting how even small interventions, adjusting a displaced stone, singing a note into a pool, created ripple effects that reinforced the harmony. By the fourth day, they understood. The valley's lattice was more than infrastructure. It was memory, song, and life, inseparable. Every element reinforced the others. Even the fissure, once a threat, had been integrated back into the lattice. The valley did not merely survive, it thrived through connection. On the fifth day, they climbed a high ridge at the northern edge, the farthest point they had reached. From there, the valley stretched below, a tapestry of terraces, pools, meadows, and crystalline veins. The carvings in the ridges shimmered faintly, sunlight catching their surfaces. Eloin gazed at it all, awe swelling in her chest. "It is beautiful, entirely complete, a lattice of life, sound, and light, not just living things, but living patterns, intelligence embedded in the land itself." Mira traced the largest spiral on the ridge with her finger, and the patterns extend beyond what we can see. The lattice may reach far past the valley, across the world itself. The song may span continents. Callan lowered his notebook, voice hushed. We are small, but we are part of it. Every note we've sung, every path we've walked, every observation we've made, our presence is now woven into the lattice. Nada reached for Eloin's hand, holding it gently, and we will remain in harmony, not disruption. That is our choice, our gift. Jonas exhaled, smiling faintly. I doubted at first. I thought this world might reject us, but it has not. It has taught us patience, attentiveness, and care. Perhaps we are capable of more than I imagined. Eloin looked at her crew, tired, exhilarated, transformed. Then let us make this our legacy, not conquest, not observation, but guardianship. We will learn the lattice, honor its design, and ensure the song endures. As the sun dipped behind the far ridges, the valley responded in kind. The flowers swelled their tones. The motes spun faster in the pools, forming vast spirals visible even from their perch. The pearl-scaled creatures lifted their heads, crests glowing in synchronized brilliance. The lattice beneath the soil thrummed softly, carrying every pulse to every corner of the valley. The explorers watched in quiet awe. They had discovered not a landscape, but a living symphony, and now they were part of it. Eloin whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "We are home." Nada's soft laughter carried on the wind. Home in song, home in light, home in the lattice itself. Callan, his eyes shining, added, "We have been given the rarest gift, a world that trusts us." Mira closed her journal for the last time, gazing at the valley. "And we have learned how to listen, not just with ears, but with hearts." Jonas, ever the skeptic, finally allowed himself a smile. "Then let us walk carefully, speak gently, sing only when needed. Our voices are part of the harmony now." Eloin nodded. "And so we will, together." Night fell over the valley, and the explorers stood in a circle atop the ridge, hands linked, voices harmonizing with the natural chords of the world. Each note resonated through the lattice, reverberating across crystal veins, terraces, and pools. The valley responded instantly, its song swelling with warmth and power, richer than any they had ever heard. It was music and memory, life and pattern, past and present entwined. The lattice, once silent and mysterious, now thrummed with recognition. The explorers closed their eyes, letting the harmony carry them, understanding finally that their journey had been not to conquer or catalogue, but to belong. And beneath the alien stars, they sang their own voices into the lattice, completing a cycle begun long before humans had ever walked the stars. The valley listened, acknowledged, and accepted. Harmony endured. And in the quiet after the song, the explorers felt it in every heartbeat. This world, lush and alive, ancient and enduring, had found new companions. They were no longer merely explorers. They were guardians, participants, and friends. The lattice pulsed softly beneath their feet. The terraces shimmered. The pools glowed. The creatures sang. And the world whispered back, patient, alive, and whole. In that vast and resonant valley, the song would never end.